All right, welcome everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. I hope you are intending to be at Scripts for Self-Advocacy. If that's not where you mean to be, there's the door. Or welcome, and hopefully you learned something you weren't planning to learn. It is exactly 10:45, and I measured my presentation last night and found out it's longer than I thought. So I'm going to start, and if folks trickle in as we go, then that's great. My plan for today, I'm going to talk quickly about the language that I'll use through the presentation. I'll introduce myself to you all, and then kind of the nitty-gritty of our agenda and our plan for today. We're going to define what self-advocacy means, talk about why it's important, and go through together some scripts or some pre-planned phrases that you can use to advocate for yourself or your loved one in different situations. If we have time, we'll do some role play practice together. That's the part that I found out really did not have time because I yapped too much. So we'll see if we get to that. I definitely want to make sure we have time for the end bullet point there to talk about asking for help. Because for me, what's really important when we talk about self-determination and self-advocacy is the emphasis on autonomy, not independence. That the goal is that you are in charge of your own life, not that you do everything by yourself. So as far as language, kind of a common topic in disability circles is this idea of person-first language versus identity-first language. So saying things like a person with a disability versus a disabled person. I'm going to use both forms of language interchangeably throughout the presentation. I'm not trying to make a political statement one way or the other. Some folks have really strong feelings. Some folks don't really care. Some diagnoses or identities really lend themselves to one. It doesn't really linguistically make sense to say like a cerebral palsy person. Like that just, it doesn't sound right. Whereas an autistic person, like autistic is an adjective, so that works. And yet some people don't prefer that language. I'm kind of gonna mix and match here. I also wanted to say this presentation is about communication, and so the language I use when I talk about communication will be like the words like talk or say or tell someone. And I want to be clear that when I'm using those words, what I mean is to communicate that, and that doesn't have to be through speech. Speech is one way to communicate. There are lots of other ways to communicate, and all of those ways are important and valid. And I also want to acknowledge the reality that in our society, speech is a prioritized form of communication that is more likely to be respected, especially in settings like with professionals, with doctors, in places of employment. I'm not saying that that's right. I'm not saying that that's good. I also just want to acknowledge that that is the world we live in. And so if your communication is multimodal, if speech is something that you maybe sometimes have access to, or if the person you care for or love uses speech alongside other forms of communication, just thinking about what ways of communicating are most likely to be heard when you're advocating for yourself. Also, as far as language, just for myself, I have what's called aphasia, which means I sometimes have difficulty finding words, or I try to say a word and I say the wrong thing, like I'm looking for the word oven and I'll say onion. And I also sometimes have a bit of a stutter. So you might hear those things come up while I'm talking. This is something that's like rehearsed and practiced and scripted. So it's less likely to happen, but just so you know, if I'm pausing for a long time or stuttering, that's what's happening for me. Speaking of me, hello, my name's Emery. I use they, them pronouns. I'm 29. As a professional, I'm a social worker. Currently, I work as a Children's Long-Term Support, or CLTS, case manager in Dane County. I'm not here as a professional, so I'm not here to talk about the agency I work for, but especially in this context of talking about advocacy, I definitely think it's worth noting that that's my background, and so when I'm talking about how to advocate with your case manager, sometimes that's a person like me, and so I want to say, like, what is it that gets me and my coworkers to listen to you? I am also a late diagnosed autistic person, and I live with a brain injury. I was born and raised here in Madison. And just for some fun trivia, some of my special interests, I'm very interested in cults, particularly the FLDS and the LeBaron clan. I'm really interested in polygamy as it associates with cults. I really have been interested in the Children of God lately, or the Family International, in case anyone else is a big cult fan. I know it's weird. Disability and LGBTQ identities are something that I like to speak about and talk about. Horses have been a lifelong love for me. I started riding horses when I was 6. I collect squishmallows. Anybody else really like the soft stuffies? Big fan? Yes, amazing. And then I don't know if people know the Finch app, but it's a little self-care app where you have, it's like a little bird, and you put in like your chores, and when you do your chores, you earn points, and then you can buy little clothes for your bird. It's very cute. Anyway, so that's who I am. Yeah. I am not in a cult. The question was whether I'm in a cult. I am not in a cult. I like to learn about cults. I am not in one. So, the actual meat of our presentation, I know I talk very fast. Please slow me down if you need to, if I'm hard to understand or if I'm going too quickly. Okay, so what is self-advocacy? When I went to start this presentation, I said, Google, tell me, what is self-advocacy? And the Oxford Dictionary said it means representing oneself or one's views or interests. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds lofty, but like, what does that mean? Understood.org was a disability advocacy site, and I really liked their definition. Self-advocacy is the ability to communicate what your needs are. And I think what's important when we talk about that is that there's actually a lot that goes into that. That's layered. Because in order to communicate your needs, you need to know what your needs are, right? And to know what your needs are, you also need to know what your strengths are. You need to know what's hard for you. You need to know what helps you, how to get your needs met, what you're asking for. You also oftentimes need to know what your rights are legally, right? If you're going into an IEP meeting, if you're going into a conversation with your employer asking for accommodations, you need to know what are you legally entitled to. You also, then, ability to communicate, you need to communicate those needs in a way that that person will understand, listen to, and then at the bottom, we need to be able to work with that other person to get our needs met. We need to be able to work collaboratively with the people around us in order to get what we're asking for. So there's actually a lot, like it seems really simple, I feel like, on the surface, and then it ends up really being a complex thing. And for me, I think knowing what you need and what's going to be helpful for you, to me, that's the hardest part. Obviously, depending on who you need to talk to and how communication is for you, that might be really challenging for you. But that self-reflection part, I think, is a very complicated piece that sounds so easy and really isn't. And then, obviously, if you're here...
Yeah. Could you speak a little bit with more purpose, because we're interpreting into Spanish.
Yes.
And it's a little fast.
Yes. If you're here, obviously, you think self-advocacy is important. Some of the reasons that I think self-advocacy is important. Self-advocacy is a central part of this idea of self-determination. Self-determination means being able to be in charge of your own life, right? And being able to direct your own life, make your own decisions, set your own goals. And in order to do that, you have to be able to ask for what you need. You have to be able to advocate for yourself when something comes up where you might need support or help. We can't do everything alone. Sometimes people with disabilities might need more support or more assistance, but everyone needs resources and needs support from others. No one does everything alone. No one is a plumber and an electrician and a gourmet chef, and right? We all call on others to help us. And people can't read our minds about what we need, so we have to be able to tell them in order to get those supports. We have to be able to communicate in a way that people understand. And I think this is a really key piece. We have to be able to persevere when we're advocating for ourselves. We often are going to hear a no. We're going to be told that we can't do that. That's not allowed. That costs too much. And a huge piece of self-advocacy is being able to persist through those initial no's and be determined in getting what you need, to continue to figure out how to explain why this is important to you, why this is valuable, why you deserve this. And sometimes that piece, that follow through, can be really difficult. It's easy to get disheartened when you hear a no. And so I think that piece too is really important. When or where have you needed to, or might you need to advocate for yourself? You can just call it out or raise your hand. The doctor. Yeah.
My mom or my brother.
With your mom or your brother?
Or my aunt.
Your aunt, your family? Yeah.
How about the dentist?
The dentist.
Transportation.
With transportation.
Your care plan.
Your care plan. School, your IRIS consultant.
Landlord.
Landlord.
Family.
Family.
Friends.
Friends. Yeah, lots of different avenues of your life, and we're going to talk about some of those in depth, and what we're going to talk about also can apply. If we talk about your doctor, some of that might apply to your dentist, or if we talk about your care plan, your IRIS consultant is part of that, and transportation may be part of that. So hopefully we'll touch on a lot of that. What, in your experience, makes advocating for yourself hard? Yeah? People not listening to you?
That's exactly what I was going to say. He took those words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, took the words right out of your mouth.
They don't think it's safe.
Other people don't think it's safe. You struggle to find your words.
Sometimes it's hard when, like if a doctor is trying to explain a procedure, but you don't really understand it, like the doctor doesn't want to really explain.
Yeah, if a doctor's trying to explain a procedure and you don't understand, but they don't know another way to explain it, for sure.
The way you want to communicate is not receptive to the other people.
Yeah, other
You
people.
don't understand how you describe things.
Yeah, other people aren't understanding your communication. Stuttering.
Talking over you.
Other people talking over you.
Someone speaking for you.
Someone speaking for you. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes you just want to say, shut up and let me get my words out. For sure. People being impatient and not listening. Yeah. Naturally insensitive, did you say? Yeah. Not trying to communicate with you. Yeah.
I think it's too expensive.
Yeah, people think what you're asking for is too expensive. For sure. Yeah, so there's lots of things. Hopefully some of what we talk about can address some of these barriers. I also want to acknowledge that sometimes the other person is just not interested in listening to you and is just a jerk, and it's not your fault, and you're doing your best, and no matter what you do, they're not changing their mind, and that there is some level, right? Communication is a two-way street, and you can do everything in your power and that other person can continue to be a brick wall. And that isn't a sign that you're a bad advocate. That isn't a sign that you're missing some magic thing that will make them listen. That's a sign that that person is not respecting you, or that that person is not open to hearing you, and that they're, for lack of a stronger word, a jerk, right? And sometimes that's just the situation we find ourselves in, and that no matter how hard we advocate, the other person is just not listening. And that's, again, really disheartening. And hopefully some of these scripts and tips help you to pursue, to be perseverant in those situations where someone else is not listening to you. But I also just want to acknowledge that no matter how hard we work, sometimes we just can't get what we need, and that just sucks. So, scripts. The term script refers to pre-planned words. Those words could be your own, they can be someone else's. Oftentimes when you hear the term scripting, you might also have heard words like echolalia or gestalt processing. You think of scripting, often it's like quotes from media. Sometimes immediately repeating what the other person says. So like if I said, "How are you?" and someone says, "How are you?" right back to me, that's scripting. But scripting can also be planning out what you're going to say in advance, like planning your restaurant order before the server asks. And I don't just mean like, okay, I'm gonna have blueberry pancakes. But like if you get your menu and you're like, okay, they're gonna say, "Hi, what can I get you?" And I'm gonna say, "I would like blueberry pancakes, please." And then they're gonna say, "Do you want whipped cream with that?" And I'm gonna say, "No, thank you." And then they're gonna ask, "Anything to drink?" And I'm gonna say, "Just water, please." "Blueberry pancakes, please." "No, thank you," to whipped cream. "Just water, please." "Blueberry pancakes, please." And then the server comes over and they say, "What can I get you?" And I say, "Blueberry pancakes, please." And they say, "Do you want whipped cream with that?" And I say, "No, thank you." They say, "Can I get you anything to drink?" And I say, "Just water, please." Yes, I did it. Sometimes the other person doesn't follow the script because they didn't read it with you. And that's come on, man. You're supposed to ask if I want whipped cream. Why didn't you? We collapsed. In my head, this went very differently. It ruins everything. But planning those things in advance can help with anxiety, overwhelm, confusion, with communication disabilities. Sometimes it can make things like stuttering or tics easier to have those plans in advance. I feel like scripts, we're talking about speech, but scripts can be alternative communication. When we see AAC, alternative and augmentative communication, I think people often think about a speech generating device, right? A tablet where you push a button and it talks. But any communication that's not speech is AAC. So that can include writing something down by hand or on your phone. That can be sign language. That can be gestures. There's lots of other ways to communicate. Again, some of those more or less likely to be understood by people who don't know you. Gestures and behavior are a lot harder for people who don't know us to interpret sometimes. If I'm at a restaurant, I don't know that the server will know what I mean if I use my body to communicate that I want pancakes. Whereas if I write down blueberry pancakes and hand it to them, they'll probably figure that out. But with a device, you can program an entire phrase into one button. So if you know there's a phrase you're going to need to say, like if you look at your order beforehand, you know you want blueberry pancakes. "I would like blueberry pancakes, please," could be one button instead of having to go, "I want blueberry pancakes, please." That's so much more work. One button. Or again, at the doctor's, "My foot hurts." If you know going in, "My foot hurts, that's why I'm here," I could have one button prepared that says "My foot hurts," so we can get straight to the point. Similarly, writing down on a note card, piece of paper, typing in your phone. Sometimes those pre-planning, you're able then to read off your phone or your note card and use your voice. sometimes you just turn around, hand your phone. I sometimes will, like going up to a restaurant, like to an ordering counter, I'll show my phone, like the notes on my phone with my order to the register. So those are great ways to use those scripts in a non-vocal way. And obviously, our scripts need to be different in different settings. If I go to my landlord and I say, my foot hurts, my landlord's like, I don't care. Too bad for you. But if I go to my doctor and I say my foot hurts, that's a lot more relevant. If I go to my case manager and I say, I need transportation added to my IRIS plan, that's relevant. If I'm with my landlord, they don't care about that, right? So thinking about ahead of time for the situation, what script is going to be useful. So these are the categories that I'm going to talk about today. They're obviously not the only categories. We talked about different areas you might need to advocate that aren't just service providers, doctors, and work. I picked kind of some broad ones that I hoped would be broadly useful. I did have handouts that had the text and the scripts that are going to be on my slides. I did not print them and bring them. So they're on the conference website if you want to print them for yourselves or reference them when you go home or on your phones right now if you really feel excited about that. And my apologies. So first of all, ways to say no. I feel like this one's a little bit obvious. You can just say no. But also I think it's really important because as disabled people, our no's are really often not respected. And so thinking about different ways to say no, depending on the context, depending on whether our no's are being listened to, being more detailed, less detailed, more precise, more polite, less polite, I think can be really helpful. So, no, stop it. I don't like that. Please give me space. I don't want to be touched. No, thank you. Polite version. I don't consent. I really like this one for like legal situations, medical situations. Consent is a very big ticket word. Please respect my no. Really emphasizing if someone's not listening to you. I can't do that. Not right now. Not every no is a permanent no. I don't want to go for a walk right now. Maybe tomorrow. Believe me when I say no. I know my body. I know my brain. I don't want that. Maybe another time. I said no. And I think, again, saying no can be really scary, especially to someone who has more power than you, which a lot of these categories of people, doctors, service providers, do. So being prepared with what you want to say, practicing it in front of the mirror, can be helpful to feel braver in those situations when you feel like, oh my God, what if they're mad? I've got a line. I've got a line prepared. It's typed on my phone. It's stored in my heart. I practiced it yesterday. I'm ready. I have a note here at the bottom. I want to be clear also that saying no doesn't just happen with our voices, and that if someone is crossing your boundaries or not respecting you, any way that you say no is valid and matters, deserves to be listened to. If your body is saying no by moving away, turning away, pushing, yelling, running, that makes sense. People should listen to your no, even if it isn't being said with words. If someone is not respecting your no, that's not your fault. Actually, do people have other ways to say no that aren't on my slide? Yeah.
I should say no thank you if I don't want anything.
Yeah, no thank you.
You asked and I answered.
You asked and I answered. Yeah. Thank you. Asking for what you need. Self-advocacy in general is about asking for what you need, but I kind of distilled down to some specific, like requesting items or requesting basic needs. Some sentence starters, right? Very clear. I need blank. Please give me blank. Where is my blank? Can you get my blank? I want. Sometimes wanting and needing are different, and sometimes they're the same. And then also thinking about what our basic needs are, our body needs. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. I'm tired. And whether you add on to that, I'm hungry, I need a snack, or you ask the other person to kind of infer that if you're hungry, they should feed you. And so then in my second column, I used some examples of what you might use those sentence starters for. So things like, where are my headphones? Can you get my crutches for me? I need my tablet. And then again, kind of explaining why you need that. It's too loud here. I need a quiet space. It's too bright here. I need my sunglasses. It's too crowded. I want to go somewhere else. And my personal favorite, I'm not sure what I need. Can you help me figure it out? Because, like I said at the very beginning, we don't always know what we need, and that is really okay. But asking for help to figure that out is a really important skill. Sometimes we have this just general sense that something is wrong, and being able to ask either for help to figure out what that something is, or we don't care. Something's wrong. I don't need to know, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Whatever. I need to fix it. I need to feel better. It's not important what's wrong. It's important that I feel better. So let's figure out what will help me. And that's something that I know, for example, a lot of autistic people struggle with what's called interoception, is the sensing your internal body cues of things like hunger, pain, needing to go to the bathroom. And so sometimes having a person on the outside who asks you, like, when's the last time you ate? Do you need to pee? Can be really helpful. That's one where like, or just like if you have a toddler, right, who's just like crying, you just throw a snack at them, right? Like step one, feed it. And sometimes I think with our adult bodies, it's like something's wrong, I don't know what, just feed it. Just feed it. And if that doesn't help, let's move on. But like food, water, when did you sleep? Basic needs check. And then it's like, okay, do you need a hug? Do you need some medication? Like, right, like we can keep going with our lists. And part of, I know there was a session yesterday that Dr. Marks did about self-soothing and self-care plans. I know I'm gonna look that stuff up on the conference website later because I have a feeling there's gonna be some really cool information if anyone else didn't attend that session but wants to learn about it. Okay. Advocating with service providers. I did kind of like a little scripts and tips here that connect, thinking about why you might say some of these different scripts. Case managers love goals. So if you're able to connect your request to your goals for them, that makes it much more likely that they'll say yes. So if you say, this addresses my goal because, or this addresses XYZ goal, that really helps with getting what you're asking for. Even just explaining why you need or want something. I need this because this. And it seems really simple, but if you think about it, if you just ask for something, your case manager always comes back with questions, right? And they're so annoying. They're like, okay, but why? Tell me more. And you're like, shut up, leave me alone. If you come to them with all the information from the beginning, they're like, oh, wow, I can't ask you any questions. You answered them already. I guess I have to say yes. Obviously, I'm simplifying here, but when it comes to especially goals, that's a thing where like the state asks us, why are we spending money on this? And if I can say, well, Bob needs transportation because Bob's goal is to be in the community more, and Bob goes to the community center twice a week, but he can't get there if we don't have transportation for him, then the state's like, okay, that makes sense. Check, pay for it. But if I'm just like, I don't know, Bob wants to go stuff and do stuff because he does, the state's like, wow, you're bad at your job, fired. I don't think that's exactly how it would go, but probably close to it, maybe. Also, if things are denied, if someone says no, if you're a consultant or broker or whomever, you have a right to ask why. If a service is stopped or your hours are reduced or they say you can't have something, you absolutely have a right to know why. And ultimately, you have a right to file an appeal or a grievance. And so that's that knowing your rights piece. You can say very politely, can you explain why that's not an option? Can you explain why that was denied? A little bit more forward, can you show me the policy about that? If you're a participant in Family Care or IRIS or CLTS, you should have a participant handbook that you're sent every year. You probably recycle it because who cares? But you do have a right to know what's in those handbooks, and your case manager should be able to send you like a clear, specific, like it's on page 12 citation when you ask something like, why won't you give me this service I'm asking for? They should be able to be clear to you and show you a policy. And if they can't, you have a right to ask further questions. If there's no policy, what's the reason that this is being denied? Help me understand. And again, I always like to start as polite as possible, right? We're working together, we're a team. Help me understand. Can you please explain? But if we have to be fierce, we can be fierce. And we can, again, we have these legal rights. We can file an appeal. We can file a grievance. Your case manager can't help you with an appeal, just so you know, but they can and should explain to you how the appeal process works. If you have questions or if you don't know how to file an appeal, that's their job, is to give you that form and help you understand it. So, FYI. I kind of grouped together in this service provider category like occupational therapists or like a personal care attendant, any other like direct service provider, a job coach. So thinking also about how someone who's working with you day to day is treating you, how they talk to you. Being able to say things like, I don't feel respected when you call me buddy or pat me on the head. Being able to say, I prefer for you to help me in this way. This is important to me. I think that's a really good one, because sometimes when someone's helping you with something and you're asking them to do something in a specific way, and they're like, well, whatever, the way I'm doing it is easier or faster. It's important to me. And they work for you. It's their job to do what you're asking. Sometimes they want to take shortcuts, and I get that, but this is important to me. And that won't work for me because I feel like I use this example a lot. Like if someone's trying to help you with like a transfer, helping you transfer into the bathtub, and they're like, let's do it this way. That won't work for me. That won't work for my body. Sometimes you explain, because I can't bear weight on my left leg, because I can't balance long enough to pivot. Sometimes you just say, that won't work for me. Let's do it this way. Right? And another line there, it's not on the slide, but I know my body best. I think that's a great one, especially when, like, with a PT, for example, who's pushing you to do something. I can't do that. I know my body best. Okay. And in general, I want everyone to know that you are in charge of your services, which includes who is involved in planning. And you always have a right to have a friend, a family member, or an advocate attend a meeting with you. So if you feel that you're not being listened to, you're not being respected, or you just want someone there for some moral support, you always have a right to invite whoever you want. You can invite your Aunt Sally just for fun. Yeah.
I know a situation where someone is trying to get their mom to be in meetings with them, but the people, and it's a service provider,
Yeah.
have seemed to have made the assumption that no matter what the person is telling them, that they are actually telling them what the mom wants to tell them, and it's not their own thoughts.
Mm-hmm. So the comment was that someone wants their mom present in meetings, but service providers are assuming that the mom is kind of influencing that person and that they're not speaking their own mind, they're just saying what the mom wants them to say. And I think something that's really frustrating about circumstances like that is that it can go both ways. There are times when people are truly being unfairly influenced by caregivers, and there are lots of times when people want a support person present, and that kind of unfair overprotectiveness from service providers is not founded, like you're talking about. And so for that person, if they're comfortable to say, I mean, even just, I want my mom here. These are my own thoughts. These are my own words. My mom is not telling me what to say. Maybe some like really clear, specific statements might help. There also is, to some degree, a chance to ask yourself, if they're listening to what I'm asking, how much, are they respecting that person's wishes, even if they think the mom is an influence? And if so, they can have their wrong beliefs as long as they're following what's being asked. If, of course, they're not respecting and they're being like, well, but do you really want that? I don't think you really want that. Let's do something different. Then that's a very different story. Yeah.
The situation is complicated by the fact that the person is somewhat embarrassed that they have a disability.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they act like, the old eye rolling when the mom says things.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And sometimes they're really mad at the mom because the mom is trying to help them and it seems like, it's not working that day.
Yeah.
So it's hard I can understand how the care providers could get confused by
Yeah.
this, but they are demanding that all communication be by phone and that the mom not be part of the phone call.
The care providers are demanding.
Yeah.
So just to repeat in case, that sometimes the person with the disability is maybe a little embarrassed and also maybe a little bit just having a normal relationship with a parent where there's a little bit of eye rolling and whatever mom, but that now the care providers are demanding that mom not be involved in phone conversations. If the person whose services these are is willing and able to say, I want my mom in these calls, or I want to use email instead and I want my mom included.
She said that already and they said,
And-
no, we will only do phone calls. Only phone calls when your mom
Is not present. Then I mean, both her and potentially mom have the right to say, no, we have already asked that you communicate in this way. I have a right for communication to happen how we ask for it to.
It's actually been referred to disability rights.
Good. Disability Rights Wisconsin should be involved if they're persistently not respecting that. And I think situations with family, right, are complicated too, family guardians or just family supporters, because there is that element of like, ugh, my mom. And everyone has a right to feel like their mom is obnoxious and to also want their mom to be part of their supports, right? As a person who lived independently, I called my parents for help. And I also told my parents to F off, sometimes on the same day. And because I didn't at that time have service providers who were monitoring those conversations, no one cared or told me that was wrong. But I absolutely can imagine that, right, if there was a residential provider listening to that conversation, they might have made assumptions that either my dad was, whatever, that I didn't really love my dad or want him there, or that I was belligerent or non-compliant or, there's a lot that goes into, and because families are just families, and disabled people are people. And so, we have normal human dynamics. And we deserve to have our rights respected. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to share or say about service provider relationships, experiences? Okay, I think doctors are next. Yes, doctors. Okay. Really fast, that left column, my blank hurts, very straightforward. If you have specific questions, did you test for this? What tests are you going to perform? What are you prescribing? What are you ordering? What do you recommend? Right? You have a right to ask questions about your care, and you shouldn't feel silly or foolish for asking those questions. If you have specific requests, you have a right to ask for those things, like, can I have a referral to physical therapy or to a cardiologist? You always have a right to say, I want an advocate here with me. I want my mom here. I want my best friend Bob here, whoever that is. Sometimes there are provider advocates, like a hospital social worker or a child life specialist, if that's something that you want to ask for, but also if you have your own support person. Sometimes doctors will try to send those support people out of the room, and oftentimes that's well-meaning. They want to respect your privacy. You get to choose if you want that or not. You can say, I prefer my mom stay for this. I want my dad here. And the doctors sometimes will keep trying to push. They're often trying to do that for conversations like asking about your safety, asking if you're being abused at home. They want to ask those questions one-on-one because they don't want a person who might be hurting you in the room. But if you are most comfortable having someone with you in the room, you have a right to keep that person there, no matter how much your doctor pushes you to be alone. And you can even say, I'm not comfortable with them leaving. Very clear and direct. Again, I do not consent to that. We'll come back to that guy. And like someone said, I do not understand that. Please explain again. Please explain differently. You have a right to understand what's happening in your medical care. And doctors are notorious for using jargon and words that don't make a lot of sense to humans. Not that doctors aren't human, to regular people. It doesn't make you foolish. It doesn't make you not smart to ask for things to be explained. You have a right to understand. You can and should ask. In this kind of tips section, this first one comes from the chronic illness community. If doctors are refusing to perform a test or to give you a referral, ask them to document it in your chart. Doctors don't like to have to write down that they didn't give you something. It makes them look bad. So if you say, hey, I'd really like lab work done, and they say, I don't think you need that, you're just anxious. You should just lose weight, right? Please document in my chart that you declined to do lab work. And sometimes doctors will be like, well, I guess we could do lab work if you insist. Because, ooh, it looks bad if they have to write down that they refuse to do that for you. Describing how the issue impacts your life. If you just say, my feet hurt, that's easy for a doctor to be like, okay, too bad. But if I say, my feet hurt so much that I can't get up from bed in the morning and walk to the bathroom, that clues them in. This is a serious problem. My hands hurt so much I can't type at work. I feel so sad and tired all the time that I don't have any energy to do the things I used to love to do, like crochet, right? It doesn't have to be work. It can be hobbies. It can be spending time with your friends. I think those categories of like work, self-care activities, and hobbies are kind of those main ones. And in that category of self-care, that also includes directing your own care. If you always have needed help with something, but now you can't, you need more help than you used to, or you're not able to articulate how you want something done, you're relying on your caregivers more than you used to, those are important things too. And then lastly, you always have a right to ask a doctor to stop doing something or not to do something, even if they say it's medically necessary. So physical exams, pelvic exams, pap smears. I'm not saying you shouldn't get important medical care, but if you feel unsafe, if you don't want to be touched, if you want someone else there to hold your hand, if you need a break before they keep going, you have a right to say, stop. I need a break. I don't consent. And they should stop. And I think a lot of times people don't feel like they can ask doctors to stop because medical care is important and they have to do it, and so they just keep going. But I feel like that's a place I really want people to feel empowered and know that you have a right. Okay, work. Reasonable accommodation is a magic phrase. And by magic, I just mean it's a word that's in the law. It's a legal term. And so if you use it, it means your employer is almost always required to fulfill your request. So this is a reasonable accommodation for my disability. They cannot ask what your disability is or for proof of your disability. They can ask for more detail about why the accommodation is needed. So if I ask to work from home as a reasonable accommodation, they can ask me to explain how that affects my disability, but they can't ask for my diagnosis. They can't ask for my medical records. That's private health information. Can you explain that again? Again, work is a place where you have a right to understand what's going on, right to understand directions, and there's nothing wrong with asking for things to be explained again, explained differently. I need that written down, whether that's directions on how to do your task at work or like policy information. You can always ask for information in writing. If you have a support person and you're having a meaningful conversation, I want my job coach here for this. I think a lot of times people with disabilities, especially people with developmental disabilities, are underestimated at work and not given tasks that we're capable of. So I also included some phrases around asking for more responsibility. I'd like to try doing this. I can do it. Let me try. I think those are just as important as being able to say things like, that's really hard for me, is to say, I'm really good at. Sweeping is hard, but I'm good at wiping tables. I'm looking at tables, so that's why I don't know. Typing is hard, but I'm good at talking on the phone. And helping your employer understand how to use your skills most effectively. A friend suggested this one for me, as I've stated before. Because if someone's not listening to you, being able to say, hey, I told you this before. And as I've stated is a nice professional way to say, hey, buddy, you're not listening to me. But like in a cool way. As I stated before, I'm not able to do that. As I stated before, I need dim lighting as a reasonable accommodation. As I stated before, I hate you. Not that last one. And I have kind of some general sentence starters for generating your own. A lot of these are kind of that I statement. Thinking about what are you asking for? Why are you advocating? I feel, I need, I want, I don't want, I don't like, please give me, and questions, why are you, or where is, and so filling in that information as it's relevant for your context, your person you're talking to. I don't remember what slide is next. Hang on. Okay. In thinking about what we just went through very fast and a lot of information, we'll all take a breath. Were there scripts on that list that felt natural to you? That you feel like, oh yeah, I could say that tomorrow? Or are there other ones that you use or you prefer that weren't on there that you want the room to know about, that you're like, hey, this is a really good one? Yeah.
Just this weekend, my sister's daughter was in a car accident, and she wanted more tests done, and the doctor was refusing. So she called me knowing that I would know what to say, and I told her, tell them they are documenting it in your chart that they are refusing to run tests. And they ran tests.
And they ran tests. So 1 point for it working to ask them to document a refusal. Yeah.
Sometimes I usually tell my doctor what I need, tests or not sometimes.
Yeah.
Or my dentist too.
Yeah, so with doctors and dentists, being able to ask for those procedures or those tests.
So, it'd be nice to my dentist when I say them.
Yeah, that you can be polite and you can still get what you need, for sure. Yeah.
Sometimes when I get these answers,
Can I have a minute to myself? Ooh, I like that one a lot.
I really like that this addresses my goal because I've used the, maybe not the word goal, but the giving them, this is very important to me and this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time, but I like, this addresses my goal. It's very much like you're kind of getting in the way of my movement here. I need you to, I'm on my path, I need you to get out of my way a little bit.
Yeah.
If you want to walk with me, you can walk with me, but don't try to misguide me.
Don't get in my way. This is my goal.
I like that one a lot.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What do you do if you're in a situation, I'll give you an example of working at a job and you do something that upsets your employer
Mm-hmm.
and they say that they're gonna fire you. And then you say, why? And they don't tell you the truth because somehow it seems kinder to tell you something else. And you don't know the difference. And so is that a place where you would do a why question? Why did you blah, blah, blah?
So the question was, if you're at your job and you did something that upset your employer and they're firing you or they're threatening to fire you. And when you ask why, they give you a different reason. And how would you respond to that? I'm curious what other people in the room think. And then I'm not trying to be dodgy, but yeah.
I think some of the other things you said, can you document that, like make sure it's in writing and,
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, they're gonna say what they say, but again, make sure that's documented and where is the proof of that, where can they show that?
Yeah, getting it in writing, asking for documentation. Yeah.
I think too, like where in the handbook does it say that
Mhm.
doing that is grounds for firing?
Yeah, referring to an employee handbook. I think one thing that is challenging in the state of Wisconsin is we're what's called a right to work state, which means that your employment can be terminated at any time for any reason. You can't be fired for a reason that is a protected class, so like because of your disability, but it's very easy for employers, like you said, to lie about that or to come up with excuses and get around those things. And it can be very hard to prove something like discrimination. So I love the idea of asking for a reference in the handbook and absolutely making sure it's documented. I think asking further questions, about like why, asking, is this related to that incident? Depending on what the reason they're giving you is, if that doesn't make sense to you, to say like, I don't remember doing that, or can you give me a specific date when that happened? Can you show me the emails that you're thinking about that demonstrated that conduct or whatever? Yeah.
And also, when you speak another language, to find someone that can interpret for you because it can be misunderstanding.
Yes, asking for an interpreter or finding an interpreter if you speak another language, definitely.
In those situations, is it okay to request a job coach? Whatever's going on?
Yeah, the question was, is it okay to request a job coach? Yes, absolutely. Reality-wise, the wait lists for services and things, if you're not already connected to a provider and you're in the middle of a disciplinary proceeding, the likelihood that you'll get a support fast enough to help you with this particular issue is probably low, unfortunately. Yeah. But yes, if you have a job coach, absolutely. I want my job coach involved. I want my job coach here for this conversation. I don't want to talk more until my job coach is here. 100% okay to say.
But I was gonna say too, even if you don't have a job coach, if it's a parent, a friend.
Yes, an advocate, a supporter.
You wanna stop this conversation.
Yes.
So I can have something.
Absolutely. You have a yes to say, I would prefer to have this conversation with an advocate present, whether that's, a job coach or, yes, a parent, a friend, a coworker.
I think sometimes too, it could be like a manager, but is there a human resources department? Asking, can we include human
Yes.
resources? Because sometimes things are happening over here that human resources might say.
That's not
"We
allowed.
agree with those."
Yes, including looping in HR, human resources, if your company that you work for has it. 100%, yes. Okay. I think practice. We totally can do this. So, I'm going to ask you to find a partner. If you're not comfortable practicing with a partner, you can write this down or think about it in your head. But if you're either here with someone you know or if you're ready to be brave and meet someone new, we're going to practice pretending you are asking your case manager to add a new service to your plan, whether that's family care, IRIS, CLTS. If you're not involved in long-term service, your IEP, any kind of service plan. If you don't work in any of those things, you can pick a different scenario that does apply to you. Whatever service you're asking for, if you can't think of one on your own, it's transportation. That's my go-to. Your case manager is not listening, and you need to advocate for yourself. So we're going to take turns pretending to be the case manager and the self-advocate. You can try using some of the scripts we talked about earlier. I'll put the slide up in a second. And we'll take about 5 minutes each side to practice having our conversations. And so start self-advocate. You're going to come in. What do you want to say to your case manager that you need this? Case managers, you're saying no. Your first answer is no. And then you guys get to figure out, how does your conversation go? What do you say as to advocate? Case manager, truly think, are you swayed by their advocacy? You get to decide, are you kind of a jerk or are you a nice case manager? Do you require them to be a real firm advocate or are you swayed by a little bit of advocacy? We'll find out. So here's some scripts if you want to use them to practice. Go. Okay. I'm sorry to cut people off, but I also am realizing that I'm not doing a good job of time management. So, really quick, how did that feel? Does anyone want to share back? Yeah.
I felt fantastic.
Fantastic. Oh, good. What felt fantastic?
I was, she was the case manager,
Yeah.
and I was what I needed very important.
You got what you needed?
I needed to get a new walker.
Mm-hmm.
Because the one that I have, the C part, I must have had for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, I think it's time to get a new one.
And you got her to say yes?
Well, I have my sister Jolie. Hopefully she called her during business hours,
Mm-hmm.
or even leave a message
Yeah.
and go from there.
We'll see. Okay. But you got this fake case manager to say yes.
And
Good.
yeah, I pretend this is her.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Plus, it actually felt great seeing my auntie and I did it together.
Yeah. It felt good?
Yeah, it felt more than good. I would say amazing.
Amazing. Good. Yeah. It was good to practice. Felt empowering. Oh, I love that word. Thank you.
Having the list of scripts, because it's like she got so far and then took a look and it was like, and that kind of
To have, it was helpful. Good. Yeah.
I felt brave doing it.
You felt brave. I love that you feel like you have rights. Amazing. Okay. I have like 5 minutes left with you all, so really fast. I want to make sure we talk about this. Asking for help. Because the goal of advocacy is autonomy, not independence. You're in control, not that you do it alone. There's no shame in asking for support or help. And, truthfully, sometimes people listen better to non-disabled people than they do to us. It sucks, but it's just true. So sometimes it's a strategic choice to get someone to help you. And sometimes it's just, you're just nervous, you're just scared, you just feel like you want support. That's okay too. So some scripts for how to ask for that help. I need help talking to my case manager or my doctor. Can you help me communicate with my dentist? I'm having trouble getting my message across. Talking to my therapist makes me nervous. Will you come with me? Simple ways to ask. And since I have a feeling some of the people in this room are helpers, caregivers, loved ones, I want to talk about the role of a helper too. Because there's different ways a person can help you, or you can help a person you care for. A person's role could be to talk for you in a meeting, right? Like someone mentioned that sometimes you have someone who just says, like, Johnny's feelings are, Johnny needs this. I talked to Johnny before this, and he said he wants you to know this. Sometimes a person's role is to repeat your words for emphasis because you're not being heard. To say, like, hey, Sharon just said that this is affecting her ability to work. Did you hear that? And to really, like, lift you up. Sometimes the role is just to redirect them back to you. I think this is a tendency we get for professionals to look to the caregiver or the support person instead of the disabled person. And so even if you're answering the question yourself, sometimes they'll be like, oh, is that true? Or they'll be like, oh, is Johnny having trouble with that? And for a support person to just say, Johnny, why don't you tell them? Or to just say, why don't you ask Johnny yourself? Right? Their job is just to say, his voice matters, not mine. I'm just here to hold his hand. Look at him. And so it really helps to meet with the helper beforehand to decide which of those roles you want them to take. Because obviously, if I want my helper to just tell them to listen to me, and they decide they want to talk for me, that's not going to work. Yeah?
It depends on the situation as it develops.
Yeah, it depends on the situation. And yes, it can develop differently where you might need someone to take a different role depending on how the conversation is going. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Depending on how someone's disability is affecting them that day. For sure. And that's one of the great things about being a person has a close relationship with their helper, being a helper who has a close relationship, where you're able to kind of sense how much support someone needs or wants in the moment. But having some of those conversations beforehand about what the role you want them to take, and what your goal is for the meeting or the conversation. If you're heading into a work meeting and your hope is that they're going to approve you to work from home, and your mom who's coming with you thinks that you want them to let you do only stocking, I don't know, that doesn't make sense together, whatever. But it doesn't make sense, right, if you're working at cross purposes. So, takeaways, really, really fast, right? It's important to advocate for yourself. It helps to prepare in advance. And one way you can do that is with these scripted words. It's always okay to ask for help or support. Above all, you have a right to have your needs met, your communication honored, and your desires respected. Thank you guys so much for joining me today.